Episode 306. Today is a weird day. Some news that we kind of knew was coming. Not maybe the details, but we kind of assumed. Not the greatest end of year plan. But we're here to try to parse through it and make sense of it. And figure out kind of what's next. Yiska, how are we feeling today? Also, we're here with Eric, and I'm not going to completely gloss over that. Friend of the show and volunteer producer coming on to help basically me figure out what business is and why quarterly reports are important. So thank you for coming on the show, Eric.
It's Adult News Day, yeah. We got
it's very much
we got
Adult
business.
News Day. Not my expertise, as you all very much know.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Jessica.
What a day, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys know, like, we're once again a couple of stages of grief ahead. We have known that something like okay, here, let me just, like, grieve in the sense that, like, I'm terrible at getting reports over the finish line. But that something like this was on the horizon. Like, I probably heard the first time late March. But of course, like, this is such a huge, like, this is a $100 million plus thing. Like, you gotta have, like, super solid sources for this. And I never felt secure in doing a report on that. But that affords me to be in a position where emotionally I'm in several stages of grief ahead, as is not the greatest place to be. But I think, like, for a while now, we have thought about, this season as Last Dance in some ways. I think, like, there's more doomerism in the ether than necessarily warranted. I don't want to give hopium. I just think, like, everyone is talking about that this is definitely over. There's still a probabilistic chance that it isn't. And I guess we'll get to talk about why that might be. But certainly, today was not a good news day. Okay.
No.
There were some good news, and like the Steam stuff and whatnot. But by and large, I really feel for those directly impacted by the layoffs.
Yep.
That's straight up bad news. No alternative interpretation.
It just sucks.
Like, and the other stuff is you now have a lot of over 120 early 20s or like teenagers currently in a limbo state where they don't know if what they have been trying to pursue 14 hours a day or something over the last couple of years is no longer going to be attainable for them in the future. And the same is true for the staff as well.
Yep.
And that uncertainty is a problem. I think for a while now, I've felt that this uncertainty has impacted competition. I think a lot of folks were discouraged by the lack of fan interaction, of LAN events, of uncertainty for the future. But now to see it spelled out as that, it's going to be rough. And
it's going to be rough before it gets better. It's for damn sure.
It is also, like, in my mind, I'm at the stage where I'm just like, okay, let's. It's not fair to ask this of anyone at this point, but I'm very much with Jake, thinking, like, let's give 110% for the rest of the remaining season, and then we can still see where this is going. I still think there are competitive video games to be played of teams that very much deserve attention, admiration for whatever they're putting on the server and in the practice rooms. And as long as that is true, then there's something to love. And just because, like, the transience of things is just the nature of esports and life. And as soon as the Overwatch League was announced and was one of the skeptical type, already, like, I kind of had to come to terms with the fact that, like, it's likely that I will have a moment of transience of this esport. It was true for my first esport in World of Warcraft Arena, and further loves down the line. They are not completely gone, but they are shells of their former selves.
Oh yeah,
right? Like StarCraft 2 is no longer what it once used to be, but it can very much still be enjoyed, just in a very different capacity, right?
Yep. 100%.
So yeah, I think like we're in this unfortunate but also privileged position to at least have been capable of emotionally preparing for this moment. But yeah, I feel for everyone involved. What I of course didn't know was the amount of layoffs that were going to go out.
Yeah.
And what I heard described, I think Richard Lewis brought up this point, is that his understanding is that the folks that have lost their jobs, these positions are presumably being freed up as soon as for the situation when Microsoft takes over and these new management positions have to be filled. And those guys, of course, have their own ideas, what they want to do. And in order to make room for that. And of course, like, once again, we don't know where this is going. Will you need that type of staff for the esports endeavor that we don't know what shape it takes yet? So yeah, there's still a lot of uncertainty. I'll tell you also, like, what happened today is, like, it's not like I'm 6 weeks ahead on the next story that's about to drop. This is as far as I know this story is being told. And I don't think too many people know further. I have some tea leaf readings that I will reluctantly and cautiously share throughout this episode in terms of like how some market players have moved, because you can very much expect that this is not news to ownership level.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like this had to be negotiated with those ownership. This 6 million is absolutely, as we can assume, part of the deal that the Toronto Defiant talked about, right? So, or rather, not the 6 million, but the idea of the new operating terms, I suppose. The operating terms probably, I'm not sure if they would be finalized, but we probably have a rough idea at the ownership level. And there are certain indicators as to how folks have decided, which I'm still very much researching, right? Or where folks' minds are at, how they have moved in the market, right? You may think, for instance, that depending on if you have that information during the midseason, you do not invest more into your team. You decrease spending into your team, right? And that has happened for some franchises. It hasn't happened for others, right? I think I got from Platchat that this is a majority share vote. I don't know about that, but
Majority,
right? Super majority, yeah. So that's, from what I heard over the years, that is basically how everything works in the Overwatch League in terms of dissolving this this league. That you need a super majority in order to be able to do this. But yeah, like, there is still so much uncertainty on the table. I think also the uncertainty no longer hovers in the office of Blizzard Entertainment at this point. It is in the offices of the ownership groups. I think I could see a world where some folks had an idea on the ownership level, and now they're like having to exchange with fellow owners, and minds are being changed based on that. Like their confidence level sort of, influencing each other. And yeah, I mean, we can talk about the game theory a little bit down the line, what this amount of money implies, what kind of incentive structures are being created here, right? But yeah, overall, like, I feel like this is a moment where there's a lot of doom going on. I think it's warranted. I'd like to tune it down 10% more than we're currently experiencing. Not much, but 10% is where I'd like us to move to, right?
Yeah. Anybody who's I think this is a life lesson. I think a lot of what you just kind of monologued was very akin to, and I think should speak to a lot of like Overwatch fans, because it's not lost on us. It's certainly not lost on me that a lot of even people in our community, their first esport is Overwatch. This happens, stuff really changes. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing per se. But this is really hard. This news is difficult to see a super bright future. I think that there is room for Overwatch at the esports table, but in the capacity that we've seen it in the last 5 years, that's hard to believe. I think there's a lot to kind of read in between the lines between the quarterly earning reports, which Eric is going to help me adult at the table. He's going to booster me up. I'm going to sit in my booster chair. I'm like, I got my sippy cup. I'm ready to rock and roll, baby. And I think the Verge report has a lot too. I think Yiska kind of alluded to, like, there is some game theory here that I think not a lot of people are talking about. But before we dive into stuff like that, and possibly what maybe the future holds, what this amorphous, horizon line looks like, we do have to support, we have to give a shout out to the people who make this show a possibility. So episode 306, shout out to the patron producers and our YouTube members. Those being Battle Crab, Refined Bean, Bronzebot, Buhal, Picasso, Lolshin, Porkchop, Sammy, Rexane, Volamel, and Sugar High, and our YouTube members, Blave Bliss, new member, shout out you. IMDRW, Brother, Adam L, Iceham Gel, Fire Element 6, and AK. Let's just start at the top with the Verge report. Well, actually, you know what? We're skip that. We're gonna come back to that. I think the people who unfortunately got completely rug pulled by this league deserve a moment, because I think for a long time, myself and other people definitely were trying to not stir the pot, but like try to get content. And I hope that nobody ever, heard something that maybe I said. I won't speak for Yiska and Eric, definitely, God bless, but I'm sure that like it's not, nobody's coming for you, hopefully. I don't think that any content related stuff, anything, any criticism of the league was never directed towards any of these people who are laid off, because, it's not lost on me that a lot of the ideas that I think a lot of these people had to go through or tried to spin up, they would have loved to just pull the trigger on and make. I have to assume that much. So it's not, none of the criticisms was ever, and none of the critiques, the criticism was never directed at the people who are, actively being affected. I think this is from a management level, and this is from, a business standpoint that was, we kind of talked about this with the Overwatch 2 PvE delay. Overwatch League kind of was just a poop sandwich, to use a lack of a better term. And people tried to make sense of it. On top of that, just I would have to guess, bureaucracy of things makes it really difficult to try to do things maybe, some creatives really want to do. And it just sucks to see. Hopefully a lot of these people land on their feet. I know that there is, a meme-esque pipeline that, there is this other large developer who seemingly does esports right. They could always probably use some more people. So hopefully the people who want to stay in esports and then the funny haha industry that is esports do land on their feet, and they deserve a lot, because I can only imagine that this 5-year journey was not easy at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm showing right now on the video the 2022 finals, the staff picture post. Not all of these people are involved in the layoffs, but it definitely, I've met many of them at the event. It was a pleasure speaking with them, and they were a really enthusiastic bunch. I can only wish them the best going forward. So, yeah, it's very sad. It's difficult to go through such uncertainty, but I thank you for your service and good luck.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think that my thing is, like, a lot of those were very behind the scenes. I think from my channels, I only know of Emerald, who was laid off, who of course, like, spearheaded the editorial side of the Overwatch League website, I always felt it was not a content issue that they were facing. The content was always S tier. It was a distribution issue in order to get this to the masses. And I mean, distribution of esports written content is just a hot button topic.
It is.
To get it to the masses. Reddit is only that helpful. Twitter is only that helpful. But I certainly always appreciated the graph bags. I appreciated or heard from a lot of folks that are writers that Emerald was a great editor as well. So in that, we're definitely losing. And then, of course, like there are a lot of behind-the-scenes production that made, I believe it's an Emmy-nominated show. I'm not sure for which season that was, but I remember it
gotta be some of the earlier ones, I guess.
Being brought up. Yeah, it's it's rough, a rough one. It's also not clear to me how the departments work, because it's a layoff in the Activision Blizzard eSports department that is being outlined, which is not necessarily synonymous with the Overwatch League broadcast production team and the CDL broadcast production team, even though I expect there to be a lot of overlap. I don't think you would be likely to let go of all observers. Otherwise, I don't know if you can have...
Yeah, I think
Sean
that's
Miller.
when the skeleton crew idea comes into place, where, you know, the people who are vital to see the seasons out for both the CDL and the Overwatch League are staying. Anybody else that is not vital are likely gone. So that means production staff, assistants, extra observers, I know probably for sure were affected. You know, anything that is going to lubricate and make a production easier probably is not there now. Would be my guess.
Yeah, and to be like it, to me, the last couple of months felt like trying to find quick fixes in order to signal some positivity. I'm thinking of like the honestly like large viewership incentives during the midseason. I think those were the biggest that we've ever had. Unfortunately, didn't deliver to that degree. But whoever made that happen and pushed that through Team 4, great that you did, right? It's just really, once again, probably a distribution issue of giving that info out to folks rather than, you know, that thing not being a desirable part, because we know how big viewership incentives can be, also in other sports towards attracting viewers. Then there was the push for more shorts content, that type of stuff, right? It just felt like we're now trying to have very short-term strategies in order to, you know, generate some buzz in the short, not in the long term necessarily. And I think the vast majority, like the absolute omega blame of all of this, is both in the conception and in the running of the first couple of seasons, in the rampant overspending on certain aspects, on the mismanagement of those finances in terms of like where that dollar would have gone the furthest. I think, and that there I have to disclose personal bias. I think the idea to make an esports the new NFL will forever fail. The very reason why esports works is that it isn't the NFL. And I recall being at MSI talking to the league higher ups for Riot, and those guys also seem to agree that they had to 180 the broadcast away from traditional American sports, because that type of polish and broadcasting was very much turning away their audience from that experience, right? And it's not that they have figured it out now either. I think there is something inherently hard to capture an American attention over a long period of time. I think the only ones that are feasibly doing it right now are Valorant. But it is really hard to do that over an extended period of time. And still, I think this production team has done an admirable job. I think what the problem always was that the strategy of the upper management was always to grab as much of the little pie and not grow it, and not give equity to stakeholders in the scene, especially creatives, in order to make this product be much bigger and add with their ingenuity to this experience, but rather would have all of the rights in their corner as to not lose on if this was to pop. And I think this is not a business model that can work in esports. Esports inherently is a passion culture. It's an industry that attracts folks that are very willing to, for its honestly to a fault, to forego what they are owed in terms of salaries. They will take pay cuts. They will work long hours. They will be very talented by comparison and could go elsewhere and make much more money as a passion industry. And if you don't let these folks have equity, and they can sense it in other scenes where that's happening, where competitors like Riot are opening up potential for like co-streaming and whatnot, where folks can build their businesses around it from a third-party perspective and add to the pie, you will lose. You will lose in the competition. You will lose in the ideas department. And for me personally, if I was to ascribe like how to look forward, you got to give equity to stakeholders. You got to give opportunity to have as many fresh creative minds to come up with novel solutions on how to broadcast, how to produce, how to format, how to play this game, and have them share in the spoils and not keep it for yourself. Whether that might be through, I always strongly felt that scenes that have multiple competitors from a broadcasting perspective just produce vastly superior products. I think it's no mistake that, yes, CS is probably a better esports inherently, but the broadcasting aspect of it gains so much in terms of the competition between different broadcasting companies that unfortunately are now all consolidated mostly under one big company. That might also, what do you know, become relevant for our part of esports.
Who knows?
That, like, they just competed against each other. They competed against each other for major rights, for broadcasting, for audience, and that competition brought about a lot of innovation that we just killed by introducing this franchising aspect. We all added a ton of stability. I think that was one of the best aspects of franchising. I think this esport probably would have already like downsized heavily if it wasn't franchised for the last 2 years.
Likely. Yeah.
I think the standards being upheld in terms of player salaries and whatnot, and the production would have probably caved before had it been a more open system, as capital is, moves more fluidly through these systems and also is cancelled more fluidly. That, like, the fact that this giant moved much more slowly than agile, smaller businesses in tandem had some strength. It also just meant it's died slow, right? So like my utmost respect, and sorry that for those that have to look for new employment, even though I think having worked for Blizzard still means something in this industry. It means it directly implies and almost certifies an ability to work long, hard, focused, talented hours at a thing, honestly, at a discount. And every company will be happy, or should be happy, to take on those creative folks that made it through the selection process of this company. And they also bring a ton of experience now in order to broadcast. I'm sure the vast majority of them will land on their feet given what they've
100%.
done in this scene.
Yep. And it's not I wish I remembered who or what short this was, but my gremlin ass was surfing YouTube shorts, and I stumbled across this guy who claimed that he used to work for Blizzard. His dad used to work there, and now he's moved to a new studio. And it's just, he was giving his like anecdotal experience of like what it was like in 60 seconds, and why he's like so much happier moving on. And that's the story that I think we're constantly kind of hearing for the last like 5-10 years, is like Blizzard has kind of seen its status as like the poster child of game development studios begin to crumble. Is that it was almost predatory on what you were paid and what you were offered. You were overworked, and if you literally go anywhere else, it's it almost revitalized. That's kind of the vibe I took from a lot of this. But there was a couple things from that I did kind of want to get across. When you talk about passion, I think you hit the nail on the head. That I think that's exactly what fans connect with. I think that's what esports has kind of grown up on. And I think that's the avenue that a lot of people are trying to, and I'm going to use the term, and I don't mean any malice behind this, they're trying to cope with. The prevailing idea that has been spun up since, let's think, the last 2 years, since COVID maybe, is that if this, this being Overwatch League goes under, then a grassroots scene just spins up, and we get back to the passionate, group who, wants to do this, understands it, and we're going to make it happen. As beautiful as that story could be, maybe will be, to be fair, I don't know. It's really hard to see that manifest for a number of reasons. I think that, and I think the three of us have kind of talked about this in plenty of pre-shows. It's really difficult to change the optics of Activision Blizzard. One of the biggest reasons I think that we aren't, Eric, forgive me if I'm using the wrong word, profitable, is the fact that we can't derive any kind of sponsorship, right? And the sponsorships that we were promised, or that these teams were promised, never came, frankly, because they didn't exist. So to turn that around with a ragtag group of passionate individuals that just want to become TOs today, that's hard for me to see, like, big sponsors trying to get a hold of, right? Maybe that happens in a few years if we as a community have proven to create a product on our own. Maybe that catches an eye, but that's not something that's going to be immediately latched onto, right? Is that weird to say?
Yeah, no, that's like, honestly, like this idea that we can just like all drop the tools and like then we start building this grassroots movement again is the least preferable option to me.
Yes. Yeah. And that sucks, because I think there are people who are honestly capable of doing it, but it is such a long shot.
It's just like we're nuking ourselves back into a Stone Age doing
yes.
So. We got to build some existing structures, and I mean, like there is still brand value here, right? I think a large problem was, of course, that we lost a tons of sponsorship throughout the problems that had been present with Blizzard in the fallout of that. But also then we didn't generate enough of a buzz when that settled down in order to attract these guys again. Keep in mind, other competing companies, had very similar issues. And if you have a product that is, as sad as it is, if you have a product that is appealing, that is very quickly forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we're currently lacking sponsors is probably no longer because of that situation. Maybe
can I raise my hand
talk about the momentum of it, but it is because we are sitting at 60K viewers max.
Oh, agreed, right? And that's, for a number of reasons, partially, YouTube isn't helping things, but that's a knock-on effect that I think we've pretty much laid out from the, the lawsuit kind of posturing that kind of felt like a short-term grab, right? I do want to kind of jump in when it comes to the sponsorship angle, because it does seem like the league is incapable or just so how to say this the right way. The optics around the company that runs the league or the league itself is so not desirable. It seems like they're having a hard time getting sponsors, whereas the teams, as of late,
they're getting better at it.
Seem to be either getting better at it or the preferable option for sponsorships to kind of run through. And
to be fair, honest, that's also like just being smarter, right? Like that's
sure,
just,
yeah.
Like, that's the
trend. I would imagine.
That's the trend that we're seeing and observing across esports everywhere. Is the further you get from the individual, the harder it is to generate marketing dollars, or to generate a return of investment for these marketing companies, as it is the individual that sells and not the team brand. And I think that's another major mistake that the Overwatch League made, that it sort of pivoted away from understanding that it's not the franchises that are the product of this league. It is very much the players. And all focus should have been given towards career longevity in this league.
Yep.
If you leave this league, you stick around. You build your brand around this league, like it is the case in other esports. Maybe you give them special co-streaming opportunities, right? To build
or knows
systems,
that they could
to build system. I'm a record on this. I'll just keep hammering this point until the cows come home. This game has created some of the biggest individual streamer brands of any game ever, and we got nilch for this, right? Like in terms of the esports side, despite these guys being involved in esports, right?
Yeah.
So there was a complete mismanagement of these appealing resources. It could have been used in very different ways. So yeah, I think like an esport that doesn't focus on the player doesn't understand the product.
Esports, period. The end.
Like, I understand, like, whenever this subject comes up, especially around localization, it's like folks love, especially apparently Americans, love to support the city.
Yep.
Then because they feel some attachment there. The general idea is, though, that while I agree there is some tribalistic energy to be harnessed here, there's not enough critical mass. Like, I'm not sure, like, this is not, like, I have no research on this. I just picked it up somewhere. In the area of Vancouver, they're like maximum of 40K Overwatch players.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
How many folks of those will be fans of the team and watch every match? Like a fraction, right? Yeah. But if you zoom out and go at the country scope, right? Or at the region scope, now it does wonders. The concept of EU versus NA is as old as esports, right? Yeah. Even the countries against each other, right? Like the World Cup aspect is a bit like is fresher, makes more sense, and the focus on the North American sector, it makes sense, especially if you want to scale up. It also unfortunately makes it so that it's very hard to monetize because you do not have the critical mass of player base in each respective market. Especially when it trickles down to actually the hardcore crowd that would support your team in the relative region, right? So,
agreed.
I think like to zoom out and harness the tribal energy of like country against country. We're doing that with World Cup, but also region against region. Which I feel like
it does. And I think like the idea of a World Cup, and I'm so glad that you went World Cup because I thought you were going revolutionary, and I was like, whoa, now we're getting crazy. Now we're getting into some real history, and I don't feel prepared for that. No, I think there is something to the idea that like World Cup does touch on something that either this community or just esports in general, I'm more preferable to the latter. does kind of latch onto, right? It is a vehicle that tells the story correctly that people can kind of get into and they buy it. There is, maybe I'm NA coping, maybe I'm just America Andy over here. I do think that the localization model would have worked for a purely NA esport, but it does not serve the global esport dream. That does not make sense for a global esport. It never did. Especially when esports is still very much, and I think maybe there was a point in time when you could have questioned this, but I think as we go into the winter, I think it's pretty clear and patently true that it's still individual based. Like you said, it is about all-star players. It's about names that you recognize. It's about following the players. It's not about the teams. There are so few career fans of teams and brands, and so much there is an attraction to the players that play, not the brands themselves. We have not escaped that. At one point, maybe you could have questioned if that was the case. Maybe we were kind of reaching a critical mass. I don't think that it just esports as a whole was ever. I don't think we were close. And Overwatch certainly was not close. And for that's a whole separate topic. And speaking about passion, I don't think you need to look too much farther these last few years than No Hill story, talking about what went on with the Valiant, all the stuff that they reportedly had to go through, all of like the pay cuts they tried to get Marvel on with, and literally the last show that we did, which I think is probably one of the better shows that we've done. Not to no offense to the rest of us, but I think Gravy's like kind of candid story of talking about how he and I think the staff. Did he say him and Gunbo took a pay cut to get show wrong?
Sauna, I think, was also in there. And
right. Yeah, like that's not something you do if we're just here to get the bag and do our job. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's something to maximize opportunity. Like that's a really, really impactful episode. And I think that deserves like its own special shout out, because you can't really talk about passion without getting to the bottom line and having people take like a cut at that. Right. I think that's really important. Another thing that you brought up was the angle of permanent partnership and or franchising and the stability it should bring. It doesn't feel like we got a whole lot of stability from it, personally. And weirdly enough, this was the same kind of angle that was brought to League of Legends. Once that whole, I think it was around the same time that like Owl started talking about like spinning up. Or just announcing that it was spinning up that Riot and the League of Legends, some of the more popular franchises. And that's like a whole nother history to get down and into. But they also kind of promised the stability of like permanent partnership and franchising that just hasn't been utilized, let's say. A lot of the promises was that, because you have a permanent stake, then your slot will appreciate. And then you can invest in the tier 2 space and you can do all these fun things if we just have a stable ground. Is it a mischaracterization for the two of you that was ever feasible, let's say? Because it's very clear that has not happened across the board in esports as a whole, ad hoc, right? Like we have great stability. We like on paper, the Overwatch League should have had great stability, and yet we didn't have like a.
I argue it did. Like this esport is dead before, like much earlier, if there wasn't this franchise model. There's no shot you have that viewership and have the same investment in other esports that aren't franchised. You're just out of it. You just pull.
Okay, Eric, where do you kind of take that?
Yeah, we brought some big names in. The rollout was very star-studded. It exploded on the scene. I agree with Yiska. I think it really brought something to the launch of this league and has carried us today. Obviously, I'd like to see more growth over those past couple of years.
Sure.
But it gave us a running start where we didn't have that with the previous scene.
Okay. Maybe I'm not explaining it super correctly. And forgive me if it's messy. But
another shot, yeah.
The stability aspect is more what I'm trying to get at is more of like it being safe money. right? And nobody could have predicted COVID, right? But even within those first couple of years, it didn't seem like teams, and this is more a critique towards the teams than anything, and this is more broad than just within Overwatch, because I do think this is also a critique of like how League of Legends has operated for a long time. But within Overwatch as well, the stability was supposed to kind of net us more fan activation, more opportunities for fans to interact. And obviously the instant retort is that, oh, well, in 2020, we were supposed to go to the homestand model and all this stuff. Yes, COVID put a kibosh to that. But I think we'd mostly agree here that that was never going to work, right? Like that just never made sense. No, and that was actually in kind of
reasons.
Yes, well, for various reasons, but it never made sense from a stability angle, right? Like that never aligned to me. That like, yes, we have stability and that like you will always be here if you buy in now. These players should have something to gain from this. And then we were supposed to go into 2020 where the players were actively like, I think they at the time had, more not feasible, but like more leverage when it came to player contracts, I think, if memory serves, then more so than they do now. That's for damn sure. But the health aspect of being able to travel and perform and do all that stuff just never made a whole lot of sense.
This is like the epitome. I'm sorry, but fuck around and find out. This is This is like levels of I know better than that's why nobody runs a global league, because it's honestly, I remember being scared shitless at the time for player mental health, and which was already like really low in the prior seasons. Now on the road with that much travel away, not great practice environments in terms of like ever changing like practice situations. They would have been great in some venues. They would have been atrocious in others. Like there was just so different standards, flying and whatnot. Like would have been the travel would have just churned away at the player's soul. It would have translated to the product. Within probably the first half of the season, we would have seen folks cry out loudly early on, and we would have come down to realize that this is not a sustainable thing. And if it was, why the hell would we have not seen that in traditional sports? Because like for instance, a product like the NBA that wants to be global, like why would they not slowly encroach upon like the other markets if that was at all feasible? Right. Yeah. The feasibility of that from a player's operational perspective, barring any technological, like if we invent teleporting tomorrow, okay. If we invent like high speed travel through out of atmosphere like rockets or whatever, and we can fly from I don't know, Berlin to Sydney in like 2 hours, whatever, then we can do it. There has been none of that would tinker with that formula that other systems wouldn't have. Or like the idea and the hubris that we're reinventing something like the easy pickings of a global sports league, it is insane. It's just like from the get-go, there were very real reasons why this can never work. And if for those reasons are actually more pronounced in esports than they are in traditional sports, because you need... because there are no diminishing returns to practice, or not as heavily, we're still practicing a ridiculous amount of hours. That under travel is just crazy. It would have completely destabilized whatever it is. And then also, we do not have these systems of, leading young professionals into a stability lifestyle. These are just like at 17, 18, they get talked to. They haven't been through PR meetings, have these systems built for them, have academies that help them grow into a professional that is sturdy, that is in their identity in order to sustain something like that. It would have been way worse. Like none of that is in place. And it would have all been at the detriment of those players. And in that, COVID not only saved the league from realizing that this business model is not sustainable because the homestands would have never been profitable, I don't think. And the idea of that would have been disproven very quickly. We already saw that a little bit with Washington when the first homestand might sell out. The second one is already has diminishing returns on the interest of that local audience. I think we would have found that out. But in terms of the player angle, crazy. That would have been nuts. Like, it's impossible to make work.
And we can't have the conversation that we just had about how esports is still very player driven, and like that is the key to creating vehicles to reach the fans, and talk about doing this global homestand model that is actively, and to some degree, I think the league understood this, and I'm going to plead the fifth here in terms of details, because I do remember that I think who is it at like Healthy Gamer, he kind of did like a whole like seminar with like the Owl pros and like the staff. I think that was prior to 2020. I think they understood that this was going to take a mental health toll on the players, at least to some degree. But I really don't think they understood to what degree that would look like. And I think that would have really had a big churn. It would have, it never, in so many different ways, it just wasn't going to.
The thing is, like,
function.
The mental health professional that you sign to go in and help these players sustain through that situation, their first prescription would be, don't design a league like this. This is crazy. Okay. Like, it's unfortunately just from premise of the league. Yeah. But again, go on.
Yeah, I think you're talking about heavily about the supply side, and you're all correct. I think it's way too much pressure, and it requires in a field that requires way too much scrim time and work. Very stressful and competition. On the demand side, I think that's also to be expanded upon. You know, you saw declining ticket sales for Washington. They were scheduled to run 5. So that the demand side, the revenue wasn't there. We're maybe breaking even on these events, hopefully, in many cases. So
haven't heard about
the revenue side
doing that.
Just isn't there.
Yeah, I think that the optimistic take from the 2020 and the homestand model front was that we bite the bullet that first year, and then we kind of recalibrate on what that model is. But even then, I think that like that's such a detriment. Like Yiska saying, he's mentioned this a couple times, and I don't think people like really grasp the magnitude. Nobody has made money from live events in esports or in Overwatch esports or the Overwatch League. Let me be very clear.
Generally esports, like you need really healthy sponsorships. I don't think, like I've heard of a third party TO in terms of like ESL and whatnot, really turning bank. Like they very much run on the business model of upping their evaluation and therefore receiving more and more VC. That it's not like they're profitable,
right?
So this is to counter that a bit. Sure. I think we did. If we look at the broadcast deal that we got in the early years, $45 million per year or so. That on a revenue share, if there's cost control, I think that teams would die for that today. Teams would be very excited, and it could be a sustainable league under that condition.
Yeah, but is that something that like right now we can that anybody is willing to shell out? Yeah.
Nope.
That's. Yeah, it would be great if everybody could get, if broadcast rights were the answer. And I feel like Twitch is also very have tightened down on that front as well, where it's like the only creators, only the biggest creators are even getting like exclusive deals from my understanding, right? Like it's becoming
not like only by competitors, like for the like Twitch is not paying you anymore, right? Like no. So in terms of like big sign-on bonus, nothing anymore in the double digits, millions, right?
Yeah. So the platforms themselves are already gun shy when it comes to like broadcasting, right? So that's just like a whole avenue that like we just won't have, and I don't know that we will ever have.
Yeah. So do we want to talk about like the implied incentive structures given the deal that we've just like gotten from this quarterly earnings report? Because so the first interesting thing to me, by the way, is whoever is in charge of Chengdu Hunters burned a cool, 5.95 million by not fielding an absolute minimum roster for the duration of the league and therefore not receiving
Can we start there? Because I wonder
I don't believe it.
Yeah, I don't believe that either. I feel like that was probably on the table, that the league, not threatening, but like that was an option that the Chengdu Hunters could have chosen. I don't know that, like you said, maybe this deal was negotiated better. Maybe they literally couldn't. Like there's a part of me that wonders if this was such a, not late minute, but like, hey, maybe we'll do this later on. Can you at least field something today to try to get there? Like, just feels like such a long shot, especially for a company that already is like kind of like infinitely is running off of like record losses from the parent company. Like, I don't know. I don't blame them, and I don't think you are, but like I think there's a lot there that gets kind of messy when it's like, oh, well, you missed the bag. It's like, I don't know if it was ever that big of a bag when they heard about it.
It's a 6 million bag, right? Like, okay, but Eric, why do you think that this is not true? Like that they have no termination liabilities so far accrued?
This happened during Q2, right? This is the same period that they were under negotiation with the OEM action, right? So they could have settled. It's not clear if they could also, if they missed out on the 6 million, that they could go into litigation against Blizzard, sue them for a 6 million or a fraction thereof. So I think there was something done. I don't think we'll ever know about it, but I don't think they just left 6 million on the table.
Yeah, I mean the deal wasn't there yet. I think they were just happy, like given the messaging at the time, to not have to pay any fines for not fielding a team, as by their franchise contract. So like maybe they were just fine to get out of it scot-free, and had they fielded a roster, maybe they could have banked in on that. Of course, you're right. We're never going to find out what it's is going to like what the deal there was internally. I think it's also, there's a real possibility, as crazy as that might sound, that the ownership company doesn't care about that money that much.
Yeah.
There was, like, from what I could find out, there was one guy that was like always very like back and forth if they want to participate or not, or like where they're going to take this. Of course, like I think it all leads back to Tencent, if I have that correctly in memory, and Huya, but Tencent owns Huya, I think. And from what I heard, it was a guy, Tencent guy that basically like
kind of was like the power player,
admins this franchise. None of the general managers beforehand or whatever, they didn't have any other staff, and that just felt very indecisive. I think like there's also like a disconnect in how business is conducted that I'm not privy to, but
sure,
the best I could find out is that it was always like, of course, that's why also it was a little weird in how the messaging went, because they said they're not going to field a roster. That didn't mean that they might not come back for the second half. I would say the fact that we're now having these summer opens actually directly indicates that there was an option on the table for the Chengdu Hunters to come back for the second half of the league. But now that we have already set up these tournament formats, that they now need one more franchise or one more team to come in for the knockout stages that were already pre-planned, that are presumably on LAN, that where everything is locked in, that they needed to come up with a method to fill that slot. They chose to do it with contenders teams. They played it out, and I think, it is 2 slots, right? It's Sinprissa and Rhodes that made it in. So fair. This is like how they went about it. I think that's a clear indication, or it might be an indication that Chengdu coming back was maybe on the table. Maybe. I
mean, that was kind of the messaging as well, and maybe that is cope, because it did seem like PR speak at some level, where it's just like, oh, well, we're going to leave open the possibility, but maybe, like you're saying, maybe that was a little bit more tangible than just like lip service.
I think like they would not, like, of course, like at the reports that they then eventually completely stepped away from the league. and that happened after the midseason. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think we will ever find out. It's also sort of like a minor point in this, because the big point is we're sitting on a cool 114 million in termination fees for Blizzard, and that creates an incentive structure for Blizzard that could create some copium for us. Okay.
Yeah.
So because as a company, you don't just want to pay 114 million, especially if you don't get anything really back for that other than the franchises and the brand value of that you're accruing, especially if you don't think you're going to get back in any way if you're not going to use it after. It of course stands in relation to a potential lawsuit that could have happened for whatever reason. Like speculating on that feels reckless. I don't think it would have been about the mismanagement of the league itself. I think that the legal dispute would have probably started at a different angle. But be that as it may, we now have like potential liabilities for Blizzard in the order of magnitude where they care, right?
Yeah.
Even a sized company, yes, it's just 1% of the like less than 1% of the total revenues and whatnot, but like this is still a significant sum of money. And if you think about it, Blizzard would rather not have to pay this if they could find a way to make this feasible for everyone to stick around, generate profit down the line, have a product. I think the recent moves maybe indicate as much in terms of like the viewership incentives and whatnot, and really trying to make the business case in getting those viewership numbers up on a already like. It's funny that we're talking about a skeleton crew now. I already feel like that beforehand.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like this is something I'd point and ask Eric. Like, do you think there's a world where that amount of money might entice Blizzard and create an incentive structure where they now want to create a product in order for the supermajority of the teams to keep buying in, as that is the more profitable approach over having to pay out that 120 or 114.
I can say that they believe that that they won't have to pay it yet. In accounting terms, they set up an accrual by expensing the 114 million today. They have not done that per their release. They said as of June 30th, a termination liability has not been accrued for the potential 114. So they believe it won't be necessary to pay it out. So either they have, it's likely they have a different incentive structure built, or they don't think the vote is going to go against them. But right now, it points to me that their accounting department doesn't think it's going to be needed to be paid out.
Is that a real implication on the probability, or is this something that you do generally as like a power play, as like a vote of, or like a messaging of confidence? Is there something political or businessy here that they haven't declared it as such?
My accounting, I'm not a CPA, but I play one on podcasts.
Okay, very good.
I would say, yeah, the accounting department, if they saw it as a likely outcome above 50%, they would make a charge to their P&L to accrue this expense.
Ooh.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the business thinking there's a less than 50% chance that they have to pay that out is not necessarily super, like we shouldn't rely heavily and confidently, but like this is, I think we're inching closer to the 10% that I'm trying to get us towards, right?
Yeah. Please, in the comments, if you're a CPA, let me know that we're wrong.
Is that confidence like integer based on the operation of this having to be a supermajority?
Yeah, I mean, it could be different things. Basically, it could mean they just don't think it's likely to pay out 114. Maybe they expect it
Something
to be
less.
40 million or something. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe they have great uncertainty, but it does say something that they have not charged this against their net income statement yet.
Okay, I should probably know this, and it's probably a stupid question, but if it requires a super majority, I assume this is to imply that it requires a super majority to dissolve. It's not that an individual franchise can just decide to walk away and take the 6 million, right? Like everyone would have to vote, and then it definitely, like it's either 0 or 115, right? 40.
We don't know the structure. I wish I could say yes, but obviously we do have no idea on the specifics of that contract.
To be fair, the supermajority comment, as far as I'm aware, is from Avast.
Correct.
Like, I don't want to put him into like any, interesting position here. But
I'm not gonna cite Avast, but like, let's play in the model that like, because I feel like that's typically how maybe an ownership group might work, right? Like we collectively vote on how things go, whether we dissolve, whether we do X, Y, Z, right? I feel like that's like that makes sense. At least color me speculative, right? And if we're agreeable to that, it also makes me wonder if there is like some stipulative deal if a team did want to walk away, because if we are going to create a good product, you don't want people to stay if they don't want to be here,
Right. But then I wouldn't give them 6, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure, whether it's 6, whatever, like I don't know what the number is, but it doesn't make much sense to like hold somebody hostage. Like if the majority want to stay, but there are people who desperately want out, then I'm sure there's like a severance deal. Obviously, they signed up for something that they never got. So I feel like there's at least some legal precedent there that they have to be. They have to have their palms greased a little bit, right?
This sets the stage for the next 3 months. They will collaborate. The OAM, all the ownership groups, the league themselves, and some will take some money. Maybe not 6 million, maybe 6 million. And some would stick around, there's a lot of room here.
Okay, here's my mega copium. Don't take me seriously. Okay,
he's huffing. Watch him out.
But what are the chances that this is already decided? That the ownership groups have already, like they were pretty close, presumably under this law firm. They already have outlined what they want out of this deal, and they have either decided to dissolve or not, because there was a supermajority probably within that lawsuit of the participating teams. I'm actually not sure if that's true. That might be wrong, because the Chinese teams were not part of it, as far as I'm aware. But let's say if not, whatever it is, right? Maybe there's already a rough agreement in terms of like what is going on, and therefore, whatever we're currently observing teams doing is already an indication of where this is.
That's heading. What it feels like, right?
Right. So,
you're selling me here, Yiska.
If that is true, then let's look at how market moves were recently made. And let me, because it's impossible to disclose what I've heard without giving the sources away. But what I will say is there are different moves, and it also makes sense in terms of like where their bankroll was at. So teams that spend a lot have cut back a little bit in their movements, right? Teams that spend very little, some of them have cut back. Some of them have stayed equal. Some of them have invested a little bit more. Okay. The spending a little bit more is weird to me. Why would you spend more if you were already out?
If you're already out, yeah.
Right? You're not getting a special deal if your brand looks slightly better, but you're getting the flat amount, right? Like you're not trying to sell to anyone but Blizzard at that point, right?
Right.
So, yeah, this is mega copium, right? Like if maybe there's still a lot to be left up. Maybe they're also looking at the viewership and how this is all developing. Maybe a lot of it is undecided. Maybe some of them have adjusted their strategy under the new operating agreement because they know what kind of rev share they can expect, and therefore have steered towards sustainability for their respective slot. I think there are teams that are probably... I could totally see. If someone told me Valiant is profitable in the Overwatch League, makes total sense to me. Of course, they're cynically like throwing these players to the wolves, right? For a rev share that is somewhere... Like last year it was $1 million, I think. It's probably less this year, but keep it in mind, the operating cost of that franchise is a joke in comparison, right? Like, it's not even the minimum salary. They assembled the team a week before Pro-Am. Therefore, that's when the clock starts on their contracts. Then it runs through end of the season. So they're not at 50K. They're like at 33K per player, times 6. They don't have much other staff there. Interestingly, they appear to have a social guy now. I'm not sure if that guy is just doing a pro bono.
I have to imagine that's intern bait.
Like, whatever it is, like they probably are getting money out of this. As messed up it is that the incentive structure is as such that they can do absolutely nothing for the prosperity of this league and be the ones that are profitable. I would feel a way if I was an owner in this. Like, even if I vote that this should keep going on, like, I would definitely feel away and try to enforce some sanctions against these types of practices, because it's just anti-business social, so to speak. But yeah, it's an interesting situation where it is mega copium. But like, maybe I missed all the signals, and we're already like, shutting down slowly towards whatever it is. I also think a lot of it depends on if it's an on-off switch or if there's a gradient of, it's okay, like maybe 10 franchises can stick around. Or if it is, like, if the super majority is in it by the contract, by your Overwatch League contract, you have to stick around, right?
Sure.
Whatever it is. Like, we lose so little, which is why I understand the doom moment. I just don't know if that's like, I don't know what's happening.
It's hard to be founded in reality at all, because of this is so above everybody's pay grade, and we have to just, like Yiska's saying, we have to just look at how the market is pointing, right? And we kind of have been talking about this, I think, since basically Vegas is doing the rebuild. I think Florida on multiple occasions has come out and said as much, that like they're signaling that they're planning for 2024, whatever that looks like. I think there's plenty of teams that like should not be spending the money that they are, but they're doing it anyways. Like, we're well aware. If you listen to this podcast, we're well aware of the health of this league. Nobody in their right mind. I'm gonna cite a former Houston Outlaws article that talked about how much money they're spending, and they're throwing around their weight with like their contract statuses, right? I think that was this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't make sense if the health of the league is pointing towards, catastrophe, or at least dissolve.
You have to look at the behavior by which time you expect this new operating terms to be known to the owners. That determines their movement, not what happens in the preseason, right? Like how they set the budgets there or whatnot.
Okay.
It is all about like the new operating terms and how that determines franchise strategy going forward. And like, the operating terms could be a lot. It could also entail a lot of uncertainty, right? The fact that we're laying off so much staff could mean that we want some fresh ideas. It could mean that we're not operating that league anymore, and we're actually outsourcing to third party.
Could be.
Like, there's a lot of
on the table.
possibilities here. And also, maybe strategically, these franchises haven't moved much as to not give away their hand. to be fair, but it is weird to me that a franchise that is definitely going to be out is going to make transfers.
Yeah, right. That doesn't make sense.
Unless those transfers mean that they're actually saving a couple of thousand. Because like, the severance, how it works is, yes, it's 30-day, right? If your player's already min, it's whatever, right? But you're not saving much money by getting rid of a player and signing a lower paying player, because the pay discrepancy between those and the remaining time on those contracts, it's just not worth the money saving strategy. Yeah. So the fact that we're still seeing some player movement, of course, like, you can't discount the human aspect of ownership, where they're like, to a large degree, this is also my personal toy, and I'd love to go out with a bang and have a successful season here and there, right? Like, for like, I don't know, like, I don't feel like some
I think
owners,
that's a non-zero.
Like,
somebody's ego is just like, I would like a trophy before this all blows up in my face and I just wasted, $10 million.
Yeah,
20 million.
But these guys are still businessmen. I don't know why. Like, once again, I'm coping so hard right now. Okay, don't take me seriously. Do not do it.
I think to a degree, I think there is a semblance of truth in the way that at least some market signs are pointing. Next to that, we do. Is it wrong? And maybe this is for the both of you. Is it wrong to look at the Chengdu Hunters and how the league handled it, or the way that they didn't handle it? Let's say, as a precedent to be set moving forward when the vote eventually happens later this year.
What do you mean handled it? They didn't handle anything. They just said, okay,
right,
bye.
exactly. It seems everything that is it seems to have happened signals that it was just like a break. No fees were paid. Nobody got anything, and they just walked away.
Hard to say.
Is that
it's really hard to say. Maybe they just thought like it entirely depends on where Blizzard thinks their legal situation is, and it's a cost benefit analysis in terms of like what you think you would, how likely you are to lose X amount, and then you just do the calculation and do the risk assessment there. So
right.
I personally think they found a sucker in Chengdu, but I also don't know anything about the deal as such.
That's
right?
fair. I think it's hard not to speculate. I think it's good content, so speculate away. Eric, any thoughts there? Is that a fair precedent, or is that me
one-off
reading the teas?
Yeah.
Hard to say. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Then let me ask you both this. Then is it? Let's play within the realm that this is a super majority. Let's say that the majority vote to continue the league for a 2024 season. Let's say that there is a severance package paid to the teams that no longer want to stay or that voted no. And we minimized. The league shrinks. Can you survive the optics? Is there a way to survive the optics of the Overwatch League has shrunk?
It all depends on the system that you're. So I think the league would like to have that, but everyone who, like, if that operating agreement is locking you into anything longer than just another season, you're insane.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Like, there's no way you should have the confidence to look
at this point
longer than one season. And I think like what it allows is to go pretty wild in how you produce this, or how you think of this league as a product, right? Or Overwatch eSports at large as a product. I think also from Blizzard's point of view, Calling All Heroes came in this year.
Yeah.
World Cup came in this
successful
year. They just want to have a wider offering. They're not laying down and just letting this die, right? Like, they're trying to find different avenues that folks can be, or invest, or Overwatch League teams can be excited about, right? They're trying to restart the ecosystem in some feasible ways, right? So I think, like, based on zero knowledge of what everything else behind the scenes is going on, what I would like to see as an owner is something that gives me confidence that there's some legs going forward, and especially that can give me some metrics as to believe that we finally got it. We finally understand how to broadcast this esport. We finally understand, or have a mode to figure out how to reach the audience once again, how to how to not be the joke of the industry anymore. I think in terms of like losing a lot of the bad PR that comes with Activision through the Microsoft purchase or the takeover can already account for a lot of that as a new start, so to speak. I think that's a PR moment that you could harness and start with fresh ideas on how this should work. I would like to see new content strategies around players and around the content that you put out. I think the idea, this article that The Verge put out in terms of we're looking at OG and Apex, the format, bruh.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand where you have to say something good, like a silver lining, and maybe you can't give away your entire hand because you're very much in the planning stages, or you can't say it much. But like, this is the weakest signaling that you could do in terms of like, really? Do you think we liked Apex because of the format? That's probably the least thing we liked about Apex. It was everything else in terms of the production, in terms of the display of character, right? Like before Kang, we had Runner, right? Like we already plucked at
basically.
this, right? So to get back to this, to get back to the personality, to get back to the production value that we had, by the way, at a feasible cost. Like OGN wasn't just like bankrolling; they were super cost effective, despite like of course not being sustainable. But like I don't know, like if anything like this comes in, right, where I as an owner have an understanding that there is new owner leadership or new strategies or new stakeholders in place that understand content, that is when my ears are picked up. Okay, this is where I get excited and can cope myself into like in another year of trying and error. Right? If you do more of the same shit, dude, run.
Then everybody's out. Yeah, we're done here. Then pack it up. Let's figure out what it looks like next. Right? Because I think that this conversation loops in together with a lot of like the last couple shows that we've had regarding some of the talks or the reports that possibly there could be a brand reevaluation of how the CDL and the Overwatch League, those brands are titled, right? Forgive the child in the background that's screaming. It's bath time. Is it harmful to speculate on what a lucrative deal would be like for the two of you? I put you both in like an ownership perspective, and I hit you with an attractive pitch, and you give me whether or not you would stay. Is that a fun idea to play through? All right. So first and foremost, we're going back to lands. We got $114 million of play money that we don't want to pay you, so we're gonna fucking bankroll that into getting a studio in Vegas. We're using that infrastructure, or we're doing live events back to Bala, right? There's a stipend, no exclusivity with YouTube. Unrestriction when it comes to merch deals to facilitate increased development when it comes to merchandising, because we've heard the report years ago at this point. I think Richard Lewis put it out. That the merchandising is shared across the board with the league and not just particularly the teams. So this allows teams to have a new share to dabble with. You can opt into it, you can not, right? If I'm a cynically min team that just wants to stay and see how the next year plays out, then I don't have to opt into it. But if I'm a team that has some money to spend and that has been, operating my business intelligently, and have money to play, maybe I develop merchandise that does well. Right?
By the way, just like keep that what Joe just said in mind. Then look at the pictures of the owner of Fanatics inviting Bobby Kotick and Robert Kraft to his like super rich mega party. Okay, like just it's a little flavor. Go on.
It does. Let's start there, right? Like non-exclusivity. So we go back to Twitch. Right, we can have the both. We can do double streams. We've seen that be successful with Contenders, Collegiate, Calling All Heroes, the World Cup. Right, we will probably see that be very successful with the World Cup, if that's not tied to the possible deal with YouTube that nobody wants to talk about. Is that enough among the other things that I listed to make your hypothetical franchises want to stay within the league? Eric, we'll start with you.
6 out of 10. I think just without the YouTube deal, that's money up front right now. That probably means a pretty strict cut in our production costs. So nothing close to what we're used to. And I think almost it needs to be a little more Korean in a way.
What do you mean when you say that?
Like we have a vast majority of the players coming from there. Is a very competitive region. I'm wondering if we can get them to broadcast at I'd say NA audience friendly time and Korea friendly time as a possible way to see the best Overwatch still.
Okay. Yiska?
It's difficult.
Yeah, agreed.
What I would like to hear is, first pitch is, we solved China. You solved the problem with China. That's like number one.
Sure,
okay.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be super sexy.
Overwatch is once again playable in China. That's okay. Now you piqued my interest.
Sure.
We have found the guy that was the creative director of Apex. He has friends. They are coming.
Shocking.
We have talked to collegiate programs.
Okay.
And found ways to incorporate them in a very contender-sian in APAC way. Okay? So the APAC model...
I'm not following.
The APAC model...
Oh, for collegiate teams?
Is now
so you're saying
collegiate,
like collegiate in contenders?
Collegiate and contenders are like integrated into Overwatch League in NA as well.
Okay.
As to help bankroll. Because let's be honest, like the level is already pretty similar, and we already have entwining of colleges and Overwatch League teams in terms of the San Francisco Shock anyway. But so that would be interesting. Just using the local infrastructure of predominantly NA franchises as a way to, find symbiosis there.
Right.
And then I want to hear content strategies. I'd like to hear more. Honestly, I'd like to be clued in a little bit more in what is planned for the game proper at large.
Okay. Yeah.
If I can believe that there's longevity there, I would. I would like to know how sponsorship talks are going with certain things. If there are any other competitive products that are interesting, I would like to know if there are ways to reduce production cost, maybe by splitting the bills on a studio with a CDL or whatnot, much like Riot is doing for Valorant and League of Legends in Berlin.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is not no.
6 out of 10. We're good.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing a no. Which is good. Yeah, right? I think that
dude, I feel like this ownership group is already also part of the mega copium club. You just got to give them a little bit.
Right.
You the fact that these guys are still in or here and they really took this long to cause a sting is sort of like a testament towards especially the vocal parts of the ownership groups like Madamu. They are pretty they believe in the product still to some degree, right? To the core product of it.
Yeah.
And I think you got to give them something, but I also don't think it's a lost cause on these folks if I have them pegged right.
It does feel that way, and it's interesting to hear a lot of the reactions when you talk about going to LAN. Some of the community talking about I wish we could have LANs back. I wish we could do the homestand. Nobody's never on the same page, but there is this feeling of the ownership maybe not being super enticed to that because they eventually want to do something.
What's really important actually, and there's on the off chance that anyone from the ownership group has made it to this point in the podcast or gets linked a clip, it is paramount to come up with an agreement between all of you and signal that to your staff and players, because I can tell you this season already has had quality deficits because players are second guessing their future. Now it's on crack. Now you're everyone's looking already how many Overwatch League machines are currently installing Valorant? It is a crazy amount. Okay. Yeah. You got to shut that shit down, and you got to shut that shit down quickly if you want to have a chance, right? You got to be realistic. I think probably something like our minimum salary is not sustainable. That would have to budge and go down a little bit. I think the top earners will have to take a massive pay cut. Maybe they don't want to and will go elsewhere. That's fine. But you actually probably can't wait until October for this all to fester, for this doomium to set in. Like, this is not a phoenix from the ashes. Like, you're probably not rebuilding from everyone already heading left, right? Like, you want to retain as much brand value of these players as possible.
Yes.
So, if we want to feel good about this, there needs to be a stern discussion between ownership groups as to give an indication of intent going down the line as to make professionals in this scene make informed decisions about their future. And not everyone will stay, but you gotta stop the bleeding. And my God, did we just rip open the wound here.
Yeah, today has definitely been a huge hemorrhage. Like you said, I think I can't imagine that anybody in the league feels stable. I know that I've had a few DMs from people that are like, "Oh, my job security just went out the window."
Yes.
This, that, the other thing. Like these are real conversations that people are having in this space, even at our level. And that's a scary thing to think about, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head. It comes down to retaining the players should be solution number one. And I think that the number one thing that I've heard time and time again from a lot of the players since the COVID era has been getting back to LAN. They have nothing to play for.
Yeah.
Playing for money is great and all, but that's not what they signed up for. They want to play in front of a crowd. They want to hoist a trophy in front of a crowd. They want to be celebrated. They want to, they want to compete in front of a live audience. Whether or not you as an owner can facilitate that being brought to your local market is kind of out of the picture at this point, right? And I think that that's not like too crazy to say. The esports winter is way too cold. It's way too much money to be able to bring that on board. And Yiska's already talked about a number of times on this broadcast that all of those attempts don't make money. They just burn it. So you have to come together as a ownership group and hopefully collaborate with Blizzard on this front to find a studio, to find a solution to LANs, to keep the people that we have now, and we start building from here on out. We can't afford to lose anybody else. We're probably already going to lose some people, and that's a given. But I like what you're saying, Yiska. We have to stop the bleeding today, as soon as possible, or we're going to continue to run the same rat race that we've done since 2019, when all of the brands just leave, all of the player brands just leave. That is esports. We need players. We need big names. We want big names to stay, to be on the broadcast, to stay within the game, to stay within the IP. Right? Like that's how we make money across the board. Everybody grows when we keep the players that are super popular, that want to stay here. Not giving them an incentive to play for, that's doing nobody any good. Whether or not we're selling t-shirts or getting exclusive deals with the hottest new streaming platform. If the players don't want to play, the players don't want to stay within the esport, then let's just pack it up. Let's just start the wick now, because skip a T2 pipeline. We don't even have a top player pipeline,
Yeah.
That's that. I think that's well said, that it's players first at this point.
And let me make no mistake, this today has already caused a lot of damage in that regard. I think a lot of them are, and I don't think it was avoidable, but a lot
of course,
especially because this is a league that's heavily Korean, so their military services coming up. A lot of those decisions are being made right now.
Yep.
Parents are being called. I'm coming back.
Yep.
I'm doing military service. Not right now is the best time. After I go uni or whatever, right?
Yep.
Those are the decisions that we're currently making, and they will keep happening. And the longer you wait, the more of those guys will make those decisions. Once again, it feels like we are very sure this is doomed, while it's maybe 90% doomed.
Yeah, I'm not even that high on my doomer percentage, but maybe that's my own ignorance because I choose not to look into a lot of this stuff.
I mean,
because of my own sanity.
Like, if what Eric in his CPA mindset said is right, at least Blizzard believes it's less likely than
sure.
Not.
Right, exactly. So that's where it's like, I think there are outs, but somebody has to be the one to kind of bring that to the table and champion that. And I think that happens at the ownership level, where we're still stuck on trying to turn a profit within the local region and within the local market. And this being a localization global esports league, that's dead in the water. You have to, like, Blizzard kind of has to pitch them something more esports than NFL. We have to get back to LAN. We have to have new revenue, income models. Let's put it that way, like revenue streams. Maybe that's the better phrase. And I think the content just comes from LAN, right? I think that it's not lost on me that we're starting to see a trickle out of the content from the midseason. That's very, affable. It's very Apex, where, you've got two players and they're quizzing each other on things, and it's silly and it's funny, and you get some personality from it, right? That's not surprising to me. But that only happens because we're at LAN. Everything happens at LAN. You sell stuff at LAN. You put butts in seats at LAN. Everything. The fact that we are still online with very limited COVID restrictions, if at all, is an active detriment to this esport. Period. The end. We have to get back to LAN. Number one. Is that fair to say, Eric? Is that fair? Would you like this better if this was, just from a fan perspective, if this was back on LAN prior to business?
Both Yiska and I are slightly more optimistic on the metaverse in some way. So online's not terrible.
Okay. I mean, I don't hate that, but I feel like that had to have been like in the works way before, we got to this point, right?
Just generally online play, I can see some local activation. Like, I definitely see Adamu being very committed to Toronto. So to have his team play in Toronto and some other team play in Las Vegas, be it a base or whatever, I think like the China teams do right now in Korea. Sure. I think that is a possibility, and I'm not sold on 100% LAN all the time.
Okay. No, 100% is probably really hard to actualize. I think like you would have to find a market where this is actually economically feasible. It's really hard. Like
Seoul, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can't do Seoul. I mean, there's a lot of even like, I know Atlanta's actually not super crazy expensive. It's not LA. I know that there are places in North America that you could go, but there's no like local population that you could even tap into. Like, you're not going to fucking Biloxi, Mississippi to fucking host the Overwatch League. Nobody gives a fuck. Right?
Yeah.
But Vegas maybe you need a cheap city.
I know Vegas is a team city. I think the method that I'm working with is that if we do dissolve the localization aspect, then that stops being an issue. That like, oh, well, we're just giving it to Vegas, and oh, well, they get to fucking just have the studio in their home market, and we don't get anything from it. If we're evolving past the localization model, like I think we need to. We're tapping back into esports, which I think is solely, nobody wants to watch online qualifiers for things. Nobody wants to watch online CS or online League. People want to be in the audience. That's how I feel like that's how career fans are built. And I feel like that's how player brands grow. And I feel like that's how content is created, is at live events where you get emotion, you get drama. You don't get drama when I can turn off my camera or, the internet gets cut out. It just doesn't make sense. A lot of the orbiting things that make esports don't work if we can't get to see them, right? I don't know.
Good points. I think Las Vegas is a fine city because there's a lot of tourists. You'll get some revenue turnover there. Fine. But yeah, it's a difficult situation.
No, 100%. And I'm not. I am the idiot at the adult table that knows absolutely nothing. I'm just trying to make this as sexy as possible so we don't have to say night night, right? I'm just trying to get people to buy in. And that's kind of the idea of things. Any final thoughts before we at least kind of gloss over the playoff format? Because boy, howdy, did Twitter erupt.
No, I think like once again, like I implore everyone to please not clip anything out of context because we're definitely also talking out of our ass. I
Yes, 100%.
genuinely do not have any other information. Like if I can tell you ownership was puckered up about this the last couple of months since I've initially heard of it. And there is probably not much better information out there. I heard Richard Lewis talking about the possibility of ESL running something. I heard the possibility of Microsoft having a new idea on this. But it's all speculation in the ether. I'm not sure how where this is coming from and whatnot. I'm really just once again, I'm pulling a gun bar and say I know as much as you do, and that's really the truth. I'm just extrapolating from that information.
Yep. Got to talk about something, guys. Let's be honest, right? We gotta find something more than just being in our feels that our favorite esports could be dying. So
keep in mind,
this is wild speculation and content creation.
You're at the anger and sadness stage of grief. I'm at the denial.
We're at the cope phase. We're bargaining at this point. We're like, bro, look, if we can just get you some t-shirt sales, will you stay, please?
Yeah.
So yeah, playoffs.
Right.
It's a little weird, right?
Boy, howdy.
It's a little weird.
But it has Apex on it. Have you thought about that, Joe?
It does remind me of Apex. That one tournament that it was the only thing we could watch because we were all waiting for this shit. Yeah, love that. It's a little confusing, but it does kind of meet everybody in the middle, right? We've got a little double elim, we've got a little single elim, we've got some reseeding, we've got some win percentages. So if we start with APAC first, because that's the weirdest one.
Okay, you want me to run it down? Because, the Apex system is solid. It's a good system to optimize for what the requirements for APAC were. It is just this is very complex. If you're confused by the playoff format for the season playoffs proper, you're about to get lost. Okay.
Yep.
Hold tight. Take my hand. I'm about to try to lead you through this. Okay. Step 1. We have the Summer Opens. Okay. The Summer Opens bring 2 new contenders teams into the Overwatch League qualification stage for APAC. These teams can no longer qualify for the playoffs. Why? Because they were not in the knockouts for spring stage. They are exempt. Even if they win these, because they are infinity bad in the spring by not having participated, they are out. Okay? Step 1. These guys are just here in order to allow for a solid scheduling of the qualifying stage. What is the qualifying stage? It's basically what we think of as regular season play. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
In APAC, regular season play is only there to determine seeding into the knockout brackets. Okay? The qualifying stage sees the 6 Overwatch League franchises, and I believe the 4 contenders team. Is it 4? O2, Dreamers?
Yes. O2, Dreamers, Sunpressa, and
Poker Face.
Poker Face.
True. Yeah, there's a couple.
Not Sunpressa. Sunpressa is open.
Open.
Ah, that's true. You're right.
Right.
That's the 4.
So we have 10 teams now, effectively, in the qualifying stage. They play. I don't think it's a complete round robin, but they play seeding matches that I think is it 8 or 9 per?
There's 10 teams in total. There's 8 matches, so everybody gets a dodge.
Right, 1 dodge, and
yeah.
So that determines seeding into the knockout brackets. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You then play the knockout brackets, and depending on the place you get into that knockout bracket, it is going to be aggregated. Your result there is going to be put together with the spring knockouts. So let's say Spark finished in first. Average ranking right now, first. Okay? Same for Soul. Infernal.
Yeah.
They now finish in 3rd place in the summer knockouts. Both of them, let's say. Okay? 1 and 3 equals 2. Their average placement is now 2. They will be ordered in the bracket at 2. Okay? It is not match win percentage. It is average placement between spring and summer knockouts.
Right.
Knockouts. This is important. Not qualifying stage. Those don't matter. Right. Charge is boned. Okay?
Yep.
Charge. So, okay. What happens? The knockout stages, the average determines the top 2 placements for APAC. Okay? And here, now, if you're now, at this point, if you're still with me, now it gets weirder. Okay? So, the most likely scenario probably is that 2 Overwatch League teams will make it. Okay? Because the Seoul Infernal and the Hangzhou Spark are top seeds. They're still pretty strong. It stands to reason that they will grab the top slots. If that is true, we go into a play-in tournament. All not qualified Overwatch League franchise teams, not the contenders teams that are participating in the qualifying stage, and not the ones from Open, are going to play in that play-in. Okay? So, we have in that play-in, we have at least 4 Overwatch League franchise teams. Okay? Here's the weird part. If one of the contenders teams is one of the top 2 seeds as determined by aggregation of the results of the 2 knockout stages, so let's say Dreamers qualify as top 2, now the play-in format changes. Suddenly, 5 Overwatch League franchise teams are in the play-in format. The format changes, okay? If both contenders teams, so non-franchised APAC teams, are making direct qualification, let's say Dreamers and O2, okay? If these are the top 2 seeds from APAC going into season playoffs,
the play-ins,
then all 6 Overwatch League franchise teams in APAC are going to be in this play-ins. So the play-ins are modular and based on how many Overwatch League franchise teams are remaining outside qualification for knockouts. Okay? So
$20 million gets you a dance here. Yeah.
Right? So it is possible for contenders teams to qualify. This was a major misunderstanding in the format. It is possible for an Overwatch one of those contenders teams, for Dreamers, to win the Overwatch League. What they cannot do is do it through play-ins. Why? As Mr. X explained on the subreddit, it is not feasible to ask these contenders teams to figure out immigration and visas to Toronto by the time that the play-ins would have gone out. Right. Overwatch League teams, there it is feasible. Okay? There is possible that, or probable that they're getting it. Okay? So, play-ins, 0 contenders teams will ever play in play-ins. There's no way they're going to play there. The play-ins are either 4 to 6 Overwatch League teams, as determined by the amount of direct qualified, so top 2 seats we will have from the contenders teams. Okay? So, we have the top 2 seats from APAC going into season playoffs, plus 1 from play-ins that will always be an Overwatch League franchise team.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So that's the APAC part. I like it because there were a bunch of requests for the Overwatch League to optimize for. You needed to incorporate a possibility for Chengdu to come back. Right? Okay. Presumably. That's my reading of the situation. How do you do that? Through the Summer Open. Right? Sorry. You let them in, but considering they didn't come back, you have to make up for that and fill that slot, and they do that through the Summer Open. And I do agree that it would be unfair to go by win percentage of games in the knockout stages, because that would mean that all Rhodes would have to do is just win this bracket, and they automatically qualify based on performance of 4 weeks while everyone else played the entire half year in order to qualify. Right? That is Gabo. Right? Okay, so it is fair to me that Summer Open teams cannot qualify. Okay? It also incorporates contenders teams into a weak region. in terms of the amount of teams. Sorry, not weak. In terms of a small Overwatch League region, what you want is variety of matchups. You do not want the same teams playing against each other each week. It gets boring. Therefore, increasing that amount. Also, on the premise that tier 2 teams in Korea historically were pretty good. Of course, you're now running to the end of that well. Unfortunately, also because a lot of those teams were now picked apart for its parts, they are very likely to be out of the race, given that their time to rebuild is so limited. And as we've seen, I think did only Shanghai lose their match against the Contenders team? I'm not 100% sure. Maybe none of the Contenders teams won a match.
I think Shanghai lost to Dreamers.
That might have been the case, yeah. Okay.
They did.
So, I like it from that angle. You have some novelty, you have some underdog stories, and what makes it confusing is the average ranking, but I also agree that it would have been unfair, let's say, because top seeds through the qualifying stage get to skip one round, right?
Okay.
If you do win percentage of matches, then they never get the gimme from the first round. Okay? That, for instance, a team like Dreamers gets, because the level of quality of course you could have said, well, we just will value as if you won one. Okay, whatever. I think in essence, if you think about it, it therefore buffs out that it is the same ranking. Okay, so yes, while it will be confusing at the end to determine in which slots they landed, but it's not that confusing. So if I show the graphic, right, Spark first place in this bracket. Dreamers, second place in this bracket. Charge, third. Poker Face, fourth.
Oh.
Then there's
Dynasty
and they are. By the way, Rhodes is interesting. Okay, Rhodes has a first spring stage qualifier, so presumably those summer open, them as a summer open team might be eligible. I'm not sure, but I would think they're not. Okay. Also, their placement makes it practically impossible, even in first place.
Yeah.
So okay, we know how the ordering works. So now play that back in summer, right? And you get an average rating. Only the top 2 matter anyway. The seeding after doesn't matter at all, other than for the Overwatch League teams, presumably, that then get seeded into the play-in bracket.
The play-ins, right.
So, okay, that's where we are. I think we optimized for the possibility of Chengdu to come back. We optimized for Contenders teams to be introduced, which you had to do incrementally. You first had to identify the best Contenders teams, which you did in the spring stage. You incorporated them now in the second half into the regular season play, which is dope. And now you also have found a way to make it so that the entire important matches of the season matter, but because you cannot take all the matches of the year because the Contenders teams qualified.
Didn't play in all of them.
Right. So I like this. I honestly think it's a very clever system. It's just extremely convoluted.
It's confusing and convoluted, but after you unpack it, which hopefully, I'll throw Yiska some unpacking questions before we move to NA, but it does make sense when you consider all of the checks and the balances. But for those who had their eyes glazed over, let me ask you some qualifying and unpacking questions, right? The 2 teams that qualify for the APAC portion of the 2023 playoffs.
Top seeds, you mean?
Top seeds, correct. Yep. The direct qualifiers can only be Overwatch League teams.
No, they can also be contenders.
They can also be contenders. Those 2 teams have to qualify for this direct seeding based on their knockout performances and not their qualifying stage or open performances. Correct. When it comes to the APAC play-in slot, that cannot, by rule, go to a contenders team.
Correct.
Now this is an honest question. I'm throwing up some softballs here, but this is an actual honest question. In the case that an APAC contenders team was to win the play-ins, does the slot then
they cannot win the play-ins. They cannot participate in the play-ins.
Okay, they can't just participate. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's the clarification.
The weird part of it is in the case that a contenders team wins direct qualification.
Correct.
Because every Overwatch League franchise has to be granted the chance to qualify for playoffs through play-ins. The play-in format changes.
Got it. Okay.
And that's a nice concession to Overwatch League teams that no doubt hated initially the incorporation of contenders teams and to be able to lose the Overwatch League trophy to a contenders team. I think it's a nice concession that even a team like the Shanghai Dragons are not down and out until they lose their last match in the play-ins. Okay,
right. Yeah.
No matter what happens, the Shanghai Dragons will be
a double
in the play-ins. Yes, I think at this point they probably are disqualified, or I can't even conceive of a bracket where the Shanghai Dragons gets top 2. It's probably impossible.
That's so. That makes APAC seems to be unpacked. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. It is a little confusing, but
the thing is, Dreamers might actually do it. Like if Dreamers have a good run, then they could be top 2 seed, and then that makes the play-ins for APAC a 5-man tournament, not a 4-man tournament. And that's it's an interesting decision, but I think it's the right one.
I like it. All right, NA, which is a little bit more palatable. Yes. I will say that was a little bit more understandable, and then I want to hit you both with a final question regarding the format. But Yiska, take the floor with the NA playoff format.
Okay. Well, we're determining regular season, right?
Yeah.
So top seeds get into. So is it top 3, Eric? Do you know?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds right.
Top 3 is directly qualified. They do not have to go through play-ins. And then we have 2 more slots for play-ins. And I believe you need to be top 10 in order to be able to get into the play-ins.
That sounds right.
Sounds right, yeah.
The bottom 3 teams are automatically out. Monzo. At this time, who would it be? Valiant Eternal London? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, like, you're very much enticed, and by the way, that makes it a little bit European, if you want, to get into even at the bottom level, you're still playing for something. Even if you look at the table, let me resize this for the viewer. Even the Valiant are not out here, man. They could absolutely still make,
top 10.
They need to win 3 while Vancouver doesn't win anymore. Okay, it's rough, but it's possible, right?
Yeah, it's non-zero.
So okay. Right. So have we arrived at the playoff format in Toronto?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in Toronto now. The big.
You want to do West play-ins? It's seeds 4 through 10 play-in bracket.
What does a play-in bracket look like? We have the lowest seeds play an elimination round. Then it's just winner bracket, losers bracket, of course, of 6 teams. If you do the count, 1-2 teams in the first round, 1-2 teams, 3. Yeah, okay. Like there will be teams even seeded into the winners round 2 based on placement, right? Logically.
Yeah.
Eric, am I wrong?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Keep going.
Okay, but however that is, however the table will be populated, I think it needs to be in order to be 6 teams. Because if you go elimination round 1-2, that's 2 teams. Winners round will be seeded, that's 4 teams. And then the winner of elimination round will be presumed. Oh, this is also winners round. Okay, never mind. Okay, yep. Okay, I got it. We see 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this is 6 teams, right? Like winners round run is 4, elimination round is 6, and then it continues in the losers bracket. Right? Okay, sweet.
Yes.
Right. Long story short, 2 teams qualify.
It's normal bracket play. You're seeded based on your, top 10 performance.
So the winners of winners round 3, those directly qualify. The loser goes to losers round 4, plays for the last available slot to Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it a total of 8 teams. Now it gets interesting, and I once again agree with how they have chosen this. I've confirmed this I've not confirmed this with the league. I've had on pretty good authority, let's say this, that Atlanta, if they were to win the league, the West, which is likely at this point, they are going to be first pick. Why? Because they won an MSM. Okay. I'm not sure if it is directly because of Atlanta or because an NA team won the West. I think it's the latter. As MSM, right? MSM awarded first pick on those brackets. So, like, if you look at the bracket tree, we have West and East 1, and West and East 1 in the lower bracket. Because this is draft, like, we have to determine if either the East first seed or the West first seed gets first pick. And because Atlanta won midseason, my assumption is
they get.
And like from what I've heard, it's going to be the Western team. Okay. So theoretically, I think who's the second place team right now? Probably Houston
Mayhem, something.
They are now pretty far away from Atlanta as well, I think. Yep. So we can assume Atlanta gets to pick first. Okay. And now it gets drafted. Right. The one thing I do not know is how the draft works. If the first seed picks all the teams that they want to be in a group, or if the second seed
gets to pick their
opponent going down. I don't know that. That's actually good that we talk about it because I'm talking myself through the problems, and I'll reach out to the league to confirm. So then we get to play, and it is a GSL format. It's 2 groups, and the groups start out as a double elimination. So the 4 teams in the upper in the group A, if you want, or group 1, play each other. It's 4 teams. If you lose, you go to the losers bracket. If you win, you go to the next round of the winners bracket. At the end, you have 1 winner and from the winner bracket and 1 winner from the losers bracket that go into the single elimination round. The same is true for the lower bracket. Okay? Right. So now we have a single elimination round. And who plays against each other?
4 teams. Yeah.
We have 4 teams. And because there's no lower bracket, if you lose here, you're out. Okay?
Yeah. Single, yeah.
The winner of the winner bracket of Group 1 will play the winner of the losers bracket of Group 2, and vice versa. Okay?
Right.
Now, and then the winners of those matches go into the Overwatch League finals, and the Overwatch League champion is determined.
Right.
Game theoretically, this works out that Atlanta should pick who they think is the best opponent, the strongest opponent they have. Why? Because it makes it so that if you pick that opponent, they are on your side of the bracket and you get a free life against them because you can go through the losers bracket. And once you're out of the first group stages, you cannot meet that team. Correct?
Right,
because
in the single elim.
In the single elim. The first time you can meet them is again in the grand finals, right? Because keep in mind, like the winner the winner of your group is going to be the top seed for the single elim, and the loser for the winner of the losers bracket is going to be in the other side of the tournament branch. So game theoretically, we're now in a position where the best team picks the second best team into their bracket. One bracket will be the clear favorite here. Right? That's that's an aspect I start hating about this. Also, it just feels pretty garbage to I understand the argument for stakes. I understand that there's an argument that you don't want absolute domination by a team like Atlanta that's currently like just stomping through. And this is made less likely to happen by this format. By I think a friend of the show, RD, had it pegged around 10%.
Owl charts on Twitter.
So, what's the percentage that Atlanta wins the season at the moment, according to?
So 64% under drafting the Outlaws and 50% as not avoid or going easiest team.
Okay, so very, very obviously, like what they should be doing. Of course, this is subject to change as the Outlaws are currently appearing to be in free fall.
Sure. Whoever the second best team is, that's who Atlanta takes, because the only other way that they meet them is in the grand finals.
Yes. Now, I dislike this strongly. Why? The current schedule works as following. First day, 4 matches. Second day, 4 matches. Third day, 2 matches. Fourth day, so far, 3 matches. Okay. Why? The only reason to not have a double elimination bracket, then if you do the math, is either the same amount of matches or one match less, so 1 match more than a single elimination bracket for the top 4. Why is that preferable? Just because the likelihood of producing a less likely champion? The problem is, what you then don't account for is that... Actually, is that true? Yeah, you're also probably making it more likely by the game theoretic part that your final is going to be between the 2 best teams. Right, Eric? Am I wrong? Yeah. I get it from that point of view. It just feels pretty bad if a bad beat happens. And when a bad beat happens, your final is automatically going to be garbage. Right?
Yep. At least from a gameplay integrity, like the best game possible.
Yeah.
Not from like a narrative perspective, because I do think that like a narrative could be forged that, like, God forbid, not forbid, but like, let's just say Dreamers does make it all the way. They make the grand finals. They're on a heater with this new patch, this new hero, and they topple the Outlaws.
Also always part of the equation now, right? We gotta value the new meta coming into it as well.
Correct.
Yeah, like, I understand that the community is not smitten with this idea. I understand that there is some hype to be had, that you're making concessions of competitive integrity to
increase entertainment.
Increase entertainment. I will say, one positive benefit is to sort of like take care of the folks that have an issue that the upper bracket winner team doesn't have enough of an advantage, and those that always like want to have a bracket reset, which is completely infeasible and stupid. But it's also really hard to find a fair advantage that makes sense in the context of Overwatch. What are you going to do? Like, going to give them, like, I don't know, the first 3 map drafts, or what? It's just very hard to find a fair advantage that doesn't just automatically mean your grand finals is going to be a stomp, right?
Yeah.
It takes care of that because, like, both finals winners will be about the same in terms of fairness, even though now that I say that, actually, one of the finalists could be one of the teams from the lower bracket. They could have won one less match also, theoretically speaking, right? But at least it's not against each other. That's always what feels a little bit weak on the chest. It's like, no, that's actually possible now. Oh, okay. Well, that might suck because it's absolutely possible that the Atlanta Reign beats the Outlaws 3-0 in the bracket, gets to the grand finals and loses 4-3. Despite having been the team coming from the upper bracket, they have only lost 1 series. The Outlaws also have only lost 1 series, and they actually have, in the direct head-to-head, the Atlanta Reign have the better score. Not that satisfying either. Be that as it may, there are no perfect formats. I think we're overblowing a little bit how bad it is. I would have preferred the other way. In essence, like, in the end, it... Like, whether or not we care will probably come down to which team wins and how gained that feels, or how fair. But it's also, hard to make room for all those matches. Presumably on day 3, where there's only 2 matches, we'll have something of these event matches, like what we always do, like the
it.
shenanigans in terms of like, the All-Stars match or something. Maybe the casters get on and
the
like
talent showdown.
Stuff like this, right? Maybe some fun announcements, not sure, right? Whatever it is. And then, like you got to leave room for some of that. But yeah, that's the full format as it's laid out for the rest of the season. I don't think it's as bad as folks point out. I agree that I would have preferred double elim though.
Yeah, you don't like it. I know you don't like it, but like, does it? Here's the two questions that I kind of derived as we were working through this, right? For the both of you, it feels like, because us as a community, shout out to Discord. If you're like the show and want to discuss dumb shit like this, join the Discord, all that good stuff. The overall discussion that I think we kind of got from the playoff format for this year was that there is a sliding scale of formats in esports, or just in competition in general, that do favor either competitive integrity, creating the best possible matchups, or creating the most entertaining product, right? Do either of you think that the way that the overall playoffs, not the NA or APAC playoffs, but the Toronto APAC, playoffs in general, does that format meet either of those goals really that well? Yiska, we'll start with you. Is this the best possible outcome for either creating an entertaining product or a competitive product?
In APAC?
No, just in the playoffs in general, the totality season playoff. Does the format create a good enough vote for either side of the spectrum?
I will say I would always personally would like to have more games. Ideally, you have round robin groups. I think it would be an immediate improvement. But given the limitations on the broadcasting days and how fun those are to observe, practically just seeding matches.
Yeah, basically.
What 7.5 out of 10? 8 out of 10?
Okay. So not the worst format ever, but not the best. Eric, any preference on the format? Do you think anything could be changed?
I really don't hate it. I think I'm along with Yiska on the 8. It's fine. Obviously I don't like the incentive to pick the best team in the draft stage.
Sure.
Driving maybe a 15% benefit. Not the chance of rematches are somewhat lower than maybe a double elim. So I don't like rematches all that much, but 8 out of 10, I'd say. I'm fine with it.
Last and final question before we get out of here. Which do you think will be more impactful, the overall playoff format in determining the season winner, or the playoff patch that we know is coming?
By orders of magnitude, the patch.
Okay. Eric, yeah. Like it does feel like the attitude around the playoff format is a little misconstrued, because we all know that this won't matter when we get a new hero and they blow open. And again, we have to remember, it's not just a new hero, it's a balance patch with a new hero and a new game mode. You could have the teams pull the longest noodle from the spaghetti bowl to get seeding and randomize whether or not it's double elimination and how that's seeded. It doesn't matter when nobody knows what the game looks like in 3 months.
It is actually like, unless there's a strong correlation between being good on control and being good on the flashpoint.
Sure.
It also means that it could change some power levels just based on if a team is
not
good
control
on control, that those teams that were good on control had their power elevated, right? Like, especially in
because you had to play it twice.
Yeah. So that falls away now that we have 5 game modes esport.
Yeah.
So that, more so than there being a new game mode, actually also shifts around power levels.
Yeah. You thought last year was a little Mickey Mouse. This year, granted, we have a little bit more time with it, but there is just so much changing that the format I respect and I appreciate people getting big pissed. I'm a pissy baby too. It ain't matter in the grand scheme of things. This patch is going to flip some shit, and the format is not going to matter whether or not a contenders team from APAC could qualify for the open qualifiers for the play-ins. Call up your nearest exhibit meme, donator. You can qualify for the qualifier while you qualify. It don't matter. This patch is going to be the bigger contentious point in the history books when we look at this, not because it's single elim here and double elim there. No, we're getting a new hero, a new game mode, and a new balance patch, a significant balance patch, usually, a month prior to the playoffs.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. That being said, Eric, thank you so much for boosting and helping us sit at the adult table with the talks around business. I know I couldn't do it without you. Same. I won't speak for Yiska.
Same.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'll be behind the scenes again next week.
he is the mystery voice that you randomly hear, audio listeners. If you ever wanted to know what Eric is up to, you got to check out the YouTube. Any shout outs for you, Eric? Well, we'll probably have you back eventually.
The GG Recon YouTube channel has got some great content these days. Let me tell you. I've seen Dante. I've seen Sam. I've heard there's more coming. Reinforce. Wow, it was almost 2 hours. I like it. It's good stuff. Doing this is top for him.
Cheers.
There you go. Speaking of, Yiska, is there anything for you to plug towards the end of the episode?
Dude. It was fun. It was 4 a.m. It was 3 hours. It was a kindergarten group being very excited about the prospect of hero bans. I'm jesting, like these consummate professionals. But it was a spicy discussion that I didn't always have a handle on, and sometimes flew wide. And I think that makes it fun. But I think we got a lot done in terms of talking about hero balance. In terms of like what is a meta that is desirable to play, what does a good meta for the Overwatch esport look like, and then actually wasn't even my plan. Hero bans snuck in there, and the justification for that actually moved me a little bit on that, mainly because I'm less of a competitive integrity zealot these days because I like this esports to survive, and it's going to be interesting. Unfortunately, I have some production issues. We'll try to save it in the edits, but still, it's like almost 3 hours straight to the dome. Some of the smartest people in the Overwatch League being charitable with their time, discussing amongst each other. Very different viewpoints. Very like a lot of devil against angel moments. On our little shoulders, having to collectively decide where this esports is going, and I think it was pretty fruitful. I was happy with the final product. Wish I could have, or I would have had higher mental acuity to keep these guys a little bit more on the rails. But I think in the end, people hopefully will enjoy this product.
There you go. Stay tuned. The GG Recon YouTube channel. Hopefully, that is coming in the coming days, if not weeks.
Probably next week.
There you go. As for me, I just did an interview with an Overwatch alumni who's moved on to bigger and better things in the League of Legends space. If anyone remembers Beatdown Boulevard from the old broadcast GG days, spoke to him. He's doing big things in League of Legends tier 2 scene in North America. So he got hit the wax lyrically a little bit. I picked his brain regarding some of the roster moves and whether or not the pipeline over in that neck of the woods is making any sense. So check that out. And yeah, spinning up some narrative stuff regarding the playoffs. We got stories to tell. This is God forbid this actually be the last year for this whole shindig. We got to send these boys out. We got to send these people out with some good stories.
This is my last plea. Grieve a little, and then join me, Joe, and apparently Jake in what might be the last dance for this league. Let's go out with a bang. It would suck. Like, I get it. Like, if you're checked out, if your heart is not any longer in here because there's no long-term benefit, fine. personally, I'd rather make it count. If it leads to a spark being set through, like that could be carried into something on the other side that manifests into something good, it doesn't need to be for me. I just want to make good memories this year. I want to go hard. I don't want to sit there in 5 years and go, what if? I want to put some dope content out.
Yeah. So that's it. That's this week. It's been a sobering week, but we will be back with games. Don't worry. We didn't get to the games this week.
Yeah, well,
guys, we'll see.
you already know this was important.
Yeah, this one had to be talked about. Forgive us. We will be back to our regularly scheduled, bantering on whether or not Boston should beat Toronto, whatever. We will get back to that. This week, we had to take precedent with some of the news. So forgive us. Grant us some leniency. And all that good stuff. Check out the podcasts. Check out the YouTube. If you want to support us, you can. Monetarily, that'd be great. If you don't want to, you can leave comments and like the show. Share it with your friends. All that good stuff. All right, 306. We're donezo. We'll see you next week with some games and better news, hopefully. Adios.
Valiant Seeker.